Hello, I'm Daniel Hines with SteinerBooks, and I'm here with author Dennis Klocek to talk about his book, Esoteric Physiology. So Dennis, what should the readers expect in a book titled Esoteric Physiology?
Well, there's physiology in it, obviously. And there's a quote from Rudolf Steiner, and he said, if people actually studied physiology, they would understand my work a lot more.
Sounds like one of the many indications of his that is yet to be fully researched.
Fully researched, yeah. So over the years in teaching, I began to recognize that in trying to teach consciousness and issues around consciousness, for the first 10 years or so, my course was called Goethean Studies, until I began to realize that the issue really with people was consciousness. Mm-hmm. So we changed the title to Consciousness Studies. And then as I taught consciousness studies for a couple of years, I began to realize that people seeking to change their consciousness were running into a wall all the time. And the wall was their own physiology.
Okay.
So their own physiology, their own neurology, their own evolution from prenatal times through embryology, and that things like homeopathy, flower essences, color phenomena, diet, even geographical medicine, even where you live, they all have a very strong influence on how you live your life and how your consciousness develops.
Okay.
So as I began to realize that, I began to study Steiner's medical lectures, and then I spent a number of years just trying to study anatomy of the brain, fundamentally, which is a task. And
like anything, it seems simple when you get started, and the deeper you go into it.
Oh, baby, yeah, really difficult, the languaging. But back in the day in high school, I had 3 years of Latin, and so at least I had something that I could begin to make sense out of the Latinate terms. And then I have a minor in biology, a major in art, but a minor in biology. And so I found that I actually began to understand neurology and physiology, and one of my favorite courses was biology and natural science. And so over time, I began to be able to read medical books kind of fluently, especially more complex things. And then I've always done alchemical studies, and I found that the alchemical studies enabled me to have a kind of shorthand. That if I didn't understand the jargon in a physiology book,
right.
I, at least alchemically, through earth, water, air, fire, I could make my way into deeper levels of physiology. I could go on JSTOR or SpringerLink and take a really complex jargon-filled abstract and read it diagonally.
I see, yeah.
So there's a kind of way of...
Just as a little digression, you mentioned alchemy, and I can imagine several viewers will hear that, and they'll have these pictures of kind of semi-ignorant people with crucibles trying to make gold out of all sorts of weird stuff. Could you maybe elucidate why alchemy maybe has a different meaning to you than perhaps the most common?
Yeah, that view is actually semi-ignorant.
Oh, I'm sure, yes. As a
sure.
historian myself, I know that, but give us an opportunity here to educate our viewers about the alternative ways of understanding alchemists and what they were up to.
But that's where esoteric physiology comes in. Sure. So the esoteric aspect is that all systems have a kind of repetitive layering, so to speak, between the physical and then the functionality is the gland system. Rudolf Steiner calls it the life body, and alchemists will call it the water body. Okay. So the secretion of a gland into the blood an alchemist would say is a kind of level in the physiology of water. And then within the blood there are gases and things, and parts per million of metals and minerals and enzymes and things like that. And an alchemist would say those parts per million are a kind of atmosphere that's in the blood that actually is the basis of nutrition. They would say that's part of the air body. And that air body in humans is actually the seat of consciousness. Today we would call it emotional cascade or endocrine cascade or hormonal cascade. These things in the language of physiology that are just seen as substances actually have analogs in consciousness. And an alchemist would say that is air.
Right. So the alchemists you're referring to are people who are viewing these systems out of a framework, out of an interpretive, again, way of seeing, really, that in their tradition they call alchemical, but it has very little to do with trying to get rich off of precipitating gold.
Oh yeah, totally. It's not about getting rich at all. It's about healing.
About healing,
you know. So I could go with the alchemical studies that I have and go to an acupuncturist, and we have the greatest time talking about earth, water, air, and fire and the different Chinese systems, and then you know, things like that, because it's much more universal language.
Right. Okay. So then you're taking this alchemical language and you are using it to interpret, if you will, medical texts.
Yes.
And so then where did that take you?
So the beauty of that is that when you do systems analysis and physiological systems, you have certain systems which are formed more in precipitates. You have diseases that are precipitates, like gout and arthritis and things like that. You have diseases that are much more fluid, like diseases where you get edema and swelling and inflammation. You have diseases that are much more aeriform, like kidney problems and things like that, or today's psychoneuroimmune patterns in physiology. An alchemist would say they are air, they are soul issues, psycho, neuro, immune. So that's what we say, but it's psychoneuroimmunology is a burgeoning study in physiology, but an alchemist would say it's an air body issue.
So in a certain sense, the alchemical lens that's in esoteric physiology is a much more effective way of organizing the vast amount of data in the medical science.
Yes, exactly.
And then focusing your research then.
And researching so that you can find, and what to me the value of it is that I can find, say, the way in which, say, rose quartz as a gem actually comes out of an aeriform plasma, according to science. It actually is a plasma state that precipitates immediately into an amorphous crystal form. It doesn't go through the geometry of a normal silicate. But that fall from a gas into a solid has an analog in physiology of the precipitation from very high levels of diffusion in the blood into forming of crystals as a disease process.
Okay.
There are also plants that do that kind of falling from more of a plasma state into a crystal form. So I can take a crystal and a plant that have those parallels and look and see, look at a disease process.
Okay.
And see a kind of synergy in the way in which the plant and the mineral come together and begin to make a medicine out of that.
Okay.
So there are ways to actually create substances and to transform substances in such a way that they are images of a particular pathology.
So then that would be an argument that things like homeopathy are not random or superstitious in the particular plants that they pick. Right. That there's an intentionality and a system behind the correspondences of why this plant for that particular disease.
Yeah.
But it seems like most homeopaths aren't necessarily themselves operating out of the insight, they're operating out of the tradition.
And right, that's correct. So in the courses I teach here now, I do this a lot, and I have homeopaths who are master homeopaths come to me and go, "Oh, thank you for explaining things that I've."
Now I know why that works.
Now I know why that works. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because they appreciate the economy of the esoteric language of this kind of finding analogs at different levels. To a scientist who is schooled in a kind of hard-nosed way, it makes them very uneasy. I've had people get very upset with me about this.
You're diluting the hard science with all this fuzzy stuff.
That's right. But then if they find that I can speak their language too,
then it's harder to discount you.
then they go, oh, well, okay. So there's a tolerance for the fact that maybe this is a different point of view.
Yeah, the interesting thing about science as an approach is it often seems to me that a lot of this research, let's say pharmaceutical research, it takes essentially a blind or scattershot approach. It's like, let us make as many different combinations of molecules as we can. We'll test them all systematically. And sooner or later, kind of like Edison and the light bulb and the proper metal for the filament, sooner or later we'll find one by process of elimination. Right. So the seeing approach would kind of save a whole lot of steps. Is that not correct? Going kind of right to the substance that would...
Well, it doesn't necessarily save steps. To me, what it does is it opens the door to much higher levels of synergy. So I think we're at the edge where the failure of antibiotics and the emergence of hospital-created diseases and things like that is pointing towards the role of placebo. So I've heard different estimations of how much the remedies that are available today in allopathic medicine are placebo, and it's somewhere around 65% is actually placebo-driven, except for real hard-nosed, silver bullets of particular antibiotics or cancer drugs. But if you took them off of the scale, there are some indications that close to 60% of the actual function of a remedy is actually placebo. So if you look on the internet at chemists and pharmacists describing placebo, they will always say it's nothing. But if you look on the internet at what a psychologist said is placebo, they have all kinds of categories of the effectiveness of a placebo. There's 4 different levels that have to be met. And they can say if you don't meet 3 of those levels, you don't have an effective remedy. Right.
Well, that's the joke in science, is it not? That the single most effective remedy, proven over and over again in thousands of studies, literally thousands of studies, is placebo.
Sure. So placebo is not nothing. So when I can find a harmony between a gem, say, and an essential oil of a plant, and then a particular function in a remedy of a disease function in the lymph or something like that, and I can make that remedy and then describe to a person who's taking that remedy how the mineral, the gem, and the oil come together to be something that actually works in a lymph node, and then I show them a micro photograph of a lymph node that looks just like the crystal form of the gem. Suddenly we're in the realm of placebo. And so, whether it's an eagle feather and a drum and some smoke that has cured many, many people through millennia, or it's the internet where I can show them the effectiveness of something. So that has excited me for many years, this kind of work. And so Esoteric Physiology, there's some embryology in there. There is a lot having to do with the relationship between thinking and health, and the transformation of thinking and health, and then a whole chapter on substances, which is kind of where I'm going now, a lot of laboratory work to make substances, because I'm really interested in autism and what that means for today's world.
Okay, so our book, Esoteric Physiology, will introduce the reader to a way of looking at correspondences and a way of organizing the phenomena of the world in complement to mainstream medicine.
Absolutely.
But also organizing it from a slightly different perspective. So I hope you have an interest in the book and hope you're looking forward to reading it as much as I am. And thank you all for tuning in.